Alrighty, guys, it is time to wrap up 2024. What a year it has been. What a year it has been. We are here today to talk about our top films of 2024 and look ahead to 2025, but we'll get there in just a little bit. But this segment today in this podcast episode is going to be my ranking of my top 10 favorite movies of 2024. The 10 films that came out this year that my top 10. And so to be honest, right, to be quite frank with you, I haven't seen every single movie that came out this year. And in fact, I'm sure that January and February, when the movie theater movies are a little bit slower, is going to be my time to catch up on all those Oscar kind of movies that are coming out, because I'd love to do an Oscar preview kind of episode in late January or early February. So hopefully, going to be able to catch up on those. I do have a couple films on here on my list, hint, hint, wink, wink, that I haven't, talked about too much, or at least one film I haven't talked about too much, that I think a couple of these films on this list are going to be Oscar contenders. So hopefully some other films, to catch up on in January. So again, it's not necessarily a complete list, but it is my list of films that I have seen in 2024, and the top 10 are here. And so, yeah, again, I also talked about the fact that, at least that I also just don't go and see every movie, because sometimes Kraven the Hunter and Madam Web come out in the same year, and you're like, well, yeah, I could spend, 3 hours of my time, and not including commuting and whatnot, to watch these movies, but is it worth it? I don't know. Maybe if and when this is my full-time job, if that ever happens, then sure, I'll go watch Madam Web and Kraven the Hunter. But for now, decided not to watch those movies. So, I mean, obviously, they would not have made my top 10 best movies of 2024. But just as a disclaimer, if your favorite movie of the year is not on this list, it probably just means I didn't get around to seeing it. And that is all. So, guys, let's get into this. Without further ado, top 10 movies of 2024. Here we go. Again, this is just my personal list. If you disagree, totally fine. I've talked ad nauseum on this channel about how our opinions are different, and that's just because we come to these movies with different expectations and experiences, and that is the best part. So make sure to comment down below with your list, your top 10 favorite movies of 2024. I'd love to hear them. And without further ado, I said that before, let's get into it. Number 10, coming in at number 10 is Moana 2. Look, Moana 2, I've thought about it, right? Is not a bad movie, in my opinion. I think it's good. I think that you compare it to Moana 1, which even then, I still am one of those people who didn't love Moana 1. I really liked it, but didn't love it. And I think this movie is just kind of a notch down. It's good. I think that I talked about this in my review recently. I think the music is lacking, and I think that there are some story arcs and story elements that are just a bit empty. Like Maui's story in this film just felt very off to me. But it's a fine movie, and I think it has some good adventure moments. It has some good lessons. I think some of the music is pretty okay, pretty good. The Beyond song, the main song, kind of the How Far I'll Go equivalent. I think it's good. I just I think people might have been disappointed in the fact that it wasn't as good as Moana 1. But hey, I think Moana 2 is a pretty good movie, pretty solid movie. Coming in at number 9 is Transformers 1. Guys, I really enjoyed Transformers 1. I thought it was, for somebody who hasn't seen any Transformers movie other than Bumblebee, so I haven't seen any Transformers movie with the word Transformers in it. I know generally the lore behind Optimus Prime and Megatron, but not really. And so being able to see a movie like this, on top of the fact that it was animated, and not to say animated films are bad, obviously. I love animated movies. I just had Moana 2 on this list. And, I'm sure you could guess there are a couple more animated films on my list above Transformers 1. But, not to say animation is bad, just the fact that I wasn't sure if I was going to dig the style or anything like that. And then on top of the fact that you have some really interesting choices here for voice actors. Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Brian Tyree Henry. And so, what's his name? Keegan-Michael Key as well. And so I thought, is this going to be a movie for me? I sat down, I watched it, I really enjoyed it. I thought that there was some great character development going on here. And as somebody who hasn't seen Transformers, it was a great introduction into this world, and I thought it was a really good time. So Transformers 1 coming in at number 9. 2 animated films to start out this list. There are going to be a couple more, like I said. Coming in at number 8, though, is not an animated film. It is Gladiator II. I am somebody who thinks the first Gladiator is very entertaining, very, very entertaining. And I thought this movie was very entertaining. Now, I've seen the criticisms for Gladiator 2. It's basically the same movie as the first one. There were some odd plot holes and whatnot. Honestly, maybe it's just my expectations that, I wasn't expecting this to be the next greatest movie of all time. And yes, I talked about this in my review. You can go check it out. All 3 of these movies have reviews. In fact, almost all of the movies on this list, I would say 6 or 7 out of the 10 films on this list have reviews on the channel for them. Gladiator 2 being one of them, I talk about the fact that, yeah, I was worried, especially towards the beginning. It felt very similar to the first Gladiator, but I think they do some interesting things here with Paul Mescal's character towards the end that I was like, oh, quite interesting. I really like Denzel Washington. I know a couple of critics that I watch don't like Denzel Washington in this movie. I really liked him. I thought he did a great job, and he really chewed up the scenery, but again, that's just me. So Gladiator 2, really, really fun time, coming in at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is the only MCU movie to come out in 2024, and that is Deadpool and Wolverine. Is this movie, the kind of cinema that Martin Scorsese is looking for in comic book movies? No. I mean, if Martin Scorsese watched this movie, he would be giddy because he would come out of it going like, this is what I'm talking about. This is why comic book movies aren't cinema, whatever. I don't care. It's so fun. It's such a fun movie, and it has some moments of emotion. I think it's not one of those movies where it kind of gets you like the Spider-Man No Way Homes, where it's a really fun movie until, Aunt May dies and you're like, oh, the feels, right? You feel it. Deadpool and Wolverine, I don't think is like that. Even the scene where Logan, has that moment in his head where Cassandra Nova is, it's like, yeah, I mean, Hugh Jackman's acting really well. Even the scene with him and Laura, really good, but I think that's more built on the fact that for people who watch Logan, you understand the gravitas and the gravity of that situation. So again, it's just such an entertaining film. From the bye moments, all the jokes about the MCU, the TVA at the beginning, the Happy Hogan scene, obviously all the not Avengers cameos, but the other MCU or Marvel characters cameos with Laura and Elektra, Blade, Channing Tatum's Gambit. It's fun. It's so fun. And just to see Hugh Jackman again playing a different Wolverine, but still Hugh Jackman, I loved it. It's so fun. So Deadpool and Wolverine coming in at number 7. Coming in at number 6 is a movie that came out a while ago. I might not even have talked about it at all on the channel, but it is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I think, is a movie that if it came out later on in the year with most of these other films that are on this list, it would have been, it would have popped, because I think that it came out in May, and I just don't think people talked about it that much. But I really enjoyed this movie. I thought that the characterizations of Noah and the world that they built after Caesar, so interesting. Proximus Caesar was that his name? So interesting to see how how legacy can be distorted. And I think that the story overall was super strong. CGI is incredible. It's amazing. And I really want to see this movie again at some point, because I had just recently watched all the Planet of the Apes movies, the James Franco one and the the Woody Harrelson ones and all that kind of stuff. And I thought I should have just said Andy Serkis. Why didn't I just say Andy Serkis ones? The Andy Serkis Planet of the Apes movies. But anyways, I had recently seen them and then watched Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and I was just so amazed at how they were able to take this franchise in a new direction while also keeping to the spirit of those movies that came before. So I was so thoroughly surprised and entertained with this movie. And I think it had a lot to say, honestly, under the surface as well. It's not, I think, as we move up this list, it's not just about entertainment anymore for me. And it's more about, there's a lot of profound messages and themes and things to think about. Commentary is what I should say that goes on in these movies. So number 6, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Coming in at number 5, speaking of profound, is Conclave. Conclave is a movie that I didn't talk about on this channel because, frankly, I didn't think people would be that interested in it, but it's coming in on my top 10 of 2024, and it will probably be one of those Oscar movies that, gets talked about a lot later, and hopefully I'll be able to catch the other ones as well. But Conclave, super fascinating movie. So it's basically, for those of you who don't know, it's about the papal election, right? This isn't a spoiler, it's the premise. It happens in the first 5 minutes, but the Pope dies, and then they have to basically elect a new Pope. And it's like political espionage and backstabbing and vote getting and politics and intrigue and twists and turns and lots of really interesting things to say about people and religion and humanity and politics, and such an interesting movie. I think at the very end as well, there's a couple neat little twists that I just wasn't expecting. I knew it was based on a book, or at least I found out after the fact, and I might even want to read the book now because it's just such a thought-provoking movie. Ralph Fiennes gives a great performance. Other actors in there like Stanley Tucci as well. Such a thought-provoking movie. It's not a heartwarming movie necessarily, but it's not one that you go, I feel icky after that. No, it's a movie that just makes you think, and it has a lot of really interesting things to ponder in there. So number 5 is Conclave. Coming in at number 4, The Wild Robot. This movie, I had heard such good things about going before it, and I didn't love the trailers, so I was a little bit iffy on if I was going to see it, but everyone just had such rave reviews for this movie, and I went and saw it, and yeah, I mean, there are moments where I almost cried. I mean, it's such an emotional movie, and yet surprisingly simple, and at its core, just a movie about parenthood, and a movie about letting go of your children when it's time. And it's such an odd thing to say about an animated movie about a robot, an AI system, but I think it just had so much to say while also being so heartwarming, so warm and joyful and entertaining. And I felt all the feels in this movie. It was so surprising how good this movie was, and I was floored. And so if you haven't seen The Wild Robot yet, I've also reviewed this on the channel. I've reviewed so far Wild Robot, Deadpool and Wolverine, Gladiator II, Transformers 1, and Moana 2. If you want to check out any of my thoughts there, just make sure to look it up on the channel and they'll be there. But Wild Robot was a movie that I recommended at the time to seeing, for everyone to see, and I totally recommend everyone to see it if you haven't yet. So The Wild Robot coming in at number 4. Another animated film, by the way. That's the third one out of the last 7, which is interesting. Coming in at number 3 is not an animated film. It is Dune Part 2. Now, I was adamant before Dune Part 2 came out that, people were like, Dune Part 1 is, it's really good. And I agree. Dune Part 1 is really good. But Dune Part 1, in my eyes, is not a complete movie. Dune Part 2, I also don't necessarily think is a complete movie, but it is one of the best second parts of a 6-hour movie that I've ever seen, which it makes it seem like I'm just kidding around and I'm making fun of the movie. No, I mean that. It's like one of the best second halves of a story I've seen. Some of you might disagree and say, you think it's a complete movie. Totally fine. Because I rewatched Dune Part 1 right before Dune Part 2. Literally the night before Dune Part 2 came out, I rewatched Dune Part 1. And I watched Dune Part 2 and I was like, it's one movie. It's a 6-hour movie. But just the technical mastery in this movie, the VFX, the sound effects, the character work, the drama, the fight scenes. Oh my goodness, the fight scenes on Gator Prime with the Harkonnens, and on Arrakis with the Emperor, or with Feyd-Rautha, and just all the fight scenes are so good. That the acting from Timothée Chalamet as he becomes the leader, the Lisan al-Gaib, with the Fremen, it's so powerful. And again, I think the one thing just kind of preventing it from being at the very top is that it's not an emotional kind of movie, and for me, emotion's kind of important. I don't need to cry in my favorite movies, but I just want to feel a wide range of emotions. But this film was intense. It was intense. And I think that in itself is worth something. And I think, again, the other thing is just that I feel like it's not really its own standalone project. It just kind of felt like a part 2, which again, for what it is, it's awesome. So Dune Part 2 coming in at number 3. Speaking of part 2s though, coming in at number 2 is Wicked Part 1. Now, this is a case where I think the Part 1, yeah, it's a Part 1. Sure, it ends at the intermission point of the Broadway musical. But this film felt complete. And the music is incredible. Cynthia Erivo is incredible. Ariana Grande is incredible. I just recently reviewed the film, so you can go check out my review for Wicked Part 1. But the story is fantastic. There's a lot of things to say here about, being different and being marginalized in society, and expecting things, expecting people to save you, or people to lift you up, and then realizing that they're not as altruistic as you think they are. The story is so incredible, and just the music is fantastic. This is a movie that as soon as it ended, especially the last 15 minutes or so with Defying Gravity, I was in my chair, I was sweating because of how, tense I was and how engaged I was. But at the end of it, when it said to be continued, I was like, give me Part 2 right now. And if that doesn't say it all, I don't know what will. So Wicked Part 1 coming in at number 2. And finally, coming in at number 1, keeping with the theme here of animated movies on this top 10 list, is Inside Out 2. I know I said a couple weeks ago in the Wicked Part 1 review that I think Wicked Part 1 was my favorite movie of 2024, and I genuinely meant that at the time, but I wasn't really, I didn't have time to sit down and make a list, and I totally forgot somehow that Inside Out 2 came out this year. And it's close, by the way. Inside Out 2 and Wicked Part 1, it's almost like 1A and 1B. I love both of those movies so much, but Inside Out 2, look, Inside Out 1 is my favorite movie of all time, I think. And I went into Inside Out 2 saying, did we need this movie? I don't know. I came out of the movie saying, yes, I think we needed this movie because it had something completely different to say. And then the second question was this movie even going to be better than the original or even match it? And no, but it got about as close as I think you ever could. I think it's different, right? It's almost like it's not even fair to compare the two, because the first one is about, emotions and feelings on a level where you're a kid, right? You're leaving home for the first time, you're feeling sadness. And this movie is about, you're growing up now, you're a teenager, you're feeling anxiety for the first time. And that's so palpable and powerful. And I love that. And I think at this point, you've sold me Inside Out 3. Make it, because I think you can make a movie where Riley goes to college or something like that. And you can deal with even more emotions about letting go of, home. Speaking of the wild robot, right? Letting go of home and parents. And I just, this movie is amazing. It's amazing how they're able to do this. Pixar is so back on a hot streak, and I can't wait to see what they do from here. Please make Inside Out 3. I'm on board with that now. So Inside Out 2 is my favorite movie of 2024. Guys, that is my ranking from let's go from 10 to 1 again really quickly. Moana 2 at 10, Transformers 1 at 9, Gladiator 2 at 8, Deadpool and Wolverine at 7, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes at 6, Conclave at 5, The Wild Robot at 4, Dune Part 2 at 3, Wicked Part 1 at 2, and Inside Out 2 at number 1. That is my list, guys. And I'd love to hear yours. Honestly, that's the most important part here. I'd love to hear your top 10 films, or even more. Just give as many as you want in this list. 15, 20, however movies you saw, totally fine. I'd love to hear that in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for a great 2024. Let's look ahead now to 2025. But first, let me know what your top 10 movies of 2024 were in the comments down below.